All right, so with the land acknowledgement, my favorite part of the acknowledgement didn't say, which was also for emerging and future leaders. So we mustn't forget that part. Did you hear me, Dwayne?
No, I'm multitasking.
Sorry.
Tell you later. All right, so we have a wonderful panel today on the Square Kilometre Array Observatory. As you know, it's in two parts. And, here in Australia, and the other part in
Sure,
China.
so you can see it and
Yes.
also
Okay.
looks like it's
All right, is that better? So I have to eat the microphone. So it's Indigenous partnerships enabling mega science infrastructures, Wajarri, Yamaji, and the SKA project. So we're just gonna start with a presentation, and after the presentation, I'll introduce the panel members, and then we'll have a panel discussion. So if you can go ahead and start the presentation. So for the presentation,
Be asked to moderate ourselves. That's really interesting. So, morning. Yeah. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. I'd just like to introduce myself. My name is Jennylyn Hamlett. I am a Wajarri Yamaji woman from the Murchison area where the SKA project is on. I am the Aboriginal Liaison Officer at our Wajarri group, which became a part of the project.
My name is Jonathan Rogers. I work for the Australian Government and I work in the Department of Industry, Science and Resources. The department leads Australia's involvement in the international SKA project. And we are also a signatory to the Indigenous Land Use Agreement. So my team manages a range of domestic agreements that help to facilitate the SKA project, the most significant of which is the Indigenous Land Use Agreement with Wajarri Yamaji.
And my name is Wheadon. I have the unenviable job title of Site Entity Leader, which tells you absolutely nothing about what I do. I'm effectively the group that manages in Yarimana Ilgari Bundara, the CSIRO Murchison Radio Astronomy Observatory, which we're about to learn more about today. So I work closely with Wajarri and with Jonathan's group to facilitate the Indigenous Land Use Agreement we'll be talking about today. So I did mention that the observatory name, one of the things we'd like to do this morning is see if we can get everyone to have a go at saying the name. We thought that might be a bit of fun. Jen's going to take you through that shortly. So the observatory was initially established in 2009 and has been established for global astronomy projects, and the Wajarri Yamaji have been key partners in that since that time. We have actually had multiple ALUAs. The first was established in 2009. Jen, do you want to take the team through the name and what it means and how to say it? When the project first came about, we were requested to put a name to the project. So we sent out invitations to different people to try and lure them in to pick a name for us. So the name that was chosen is in Yarimana Ilgari Bundara.
And what that means is sharing the stars in the sky. It's an appropriate name because that's basically what we're doing. There was a young Wajarri girl named Schinckel who chosen the name. So that's the name of the project. So do we want to have a try at saying the name? It's, yeah, in Yarimana, Ilgari, Gundara.
Well done. It normally takes us a couple of hours to get people warmed up to have a go, so that's great. So for those of you who have been fortunate enough to actually visit the observatory, if you're trapped on a bus with us, you're not getting off that bus without having to say the name. So well done. We actually think it's a really beautiful opportunity as well to share Wajarri language with the world. So it's a really nice element to the observatory name. Wait, I have the clicker. I was about to say next slide. That's on me. So we are here to talk about the SKA, of course, but there are actually multiple astronomy projects already on the observatory site. Some of you may be familiar with ASCAP, that's the Australian SKA Pathfinder, the precursor to the SKA. We also have MWA, which is Curtin University, that's a Murchison Wide Field Array, that's a low frequency telescope that's been established for some years. We also have EDGES, which is Arizona State. So they are all our wonderful partners who are already in existence on the site and have been for many, many years now. So we also have a power station on the site, which is run by Horizon Power in partnership with CSIRO. Next.
The Wajarri, there are many Indigenous cultures across Australia. Wajarri Yamaji is one of those languages, but within Wajarri we have 6 different dialects that is spread across the Wajarri nation. So each region on this map is distinct culture or language groups within Australia as a whole. So the Wajarri Yamaji people, you know, we've been in the Murchison region of Western Australia for tens of thousands of years. Some of us still live out on the Bunna, which is the country today. But within our native title, we have 3 communities that are out on the country, and a lot of our families still live out on country. So the ancient landscape of Wajarri country is dry, it's arid. It looks hospitable. But with knowledge from the Wajarri people, you can find food and baba, which is water. So in saying that, I'll hand it over to Jonathan.
Thank you. Yeah, so in doing a 1 minute quick download on what an Indigenous land use agreement, even in only a minute, it's not possible to do that without providing some Australian context. So in Australia, there is a legal concept known as native title. And native title recognises that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have ongoing rights over their lands and waters. One of the key, the native title is also enshrined in legislation, the Native Title Act, which came into being in 1993. And one of the key elements of the Native Title Act is the right to negotiate. And that gives traditional owners the ability to influence how projects are undertaken on their land. Now, for complex projects like the SKA that are long-term, quite often the outcome of that right to negotiate is an Indigenous land use agreement. They are voluntary, but once they are entered into, they are legally binding, and they basically set out how a project is undertaken on native title land. So that's Iliwas for you. Okay, so there has been we've already touched on this a little bit, so I might talk about some slightly different aspects of it, but there's been already 2 Indigenous land use agreements that have allowed radio astronomy on Wajarri country. The first one was entered into in 2009, and Rebecca's already talked about what that permitted, ASCAP, MWA and EDGES, and also the establishment of the original MRO. That was a very small piece of land, relatively speaking. It was 15,000 hectares, which is still an enormous piece of land, but relative to the Murchison, that's quite small. The next ILUA was entered into in 2022, and that was the ILUA that established Inyari Mana Ilgari Bundara, the CSIRO Murchison Radio Astronomy Observatory, which was a much larger area of land, over 300,000 hectares. And that obviously is the agreement that allows the SKA to happen alongside the other telescopes that are already there. There is also, with the current Indigenous land use agreement, there's an associated project agreement which sets out the benefits for Wajarri Yamaji, and also importantly, it has a comprehensive cultural heritage management plan, which is a very important part of the overall package. So I'll just pass over to Jennylyn to talk a bit more about the importance of cultural heritage protection.
The Cultural Heritage Management Plan was put together by a group of the Wajarri negotiators. Des was that crew. What it is that document, it preserves our cultural awareness out on the country, not so much our cultural heritage, yes. We have a lot of sites out there that need to be preserved and looked after. Basically, as the project goes through, it's more or less the Bible out on country. It just directs the people where they can and where they can't go out on country. That's our agreement with CSIRO and SKA.
Yeah, so a little more on the Cultural Heritage Management Plan from a CSIRO perspective, and certainly from a project construction perspective. So that in action, what does that look like? So we have very specific areas within the Cultural Heritage Management Plan that obviously we can and can't go. So I'm effectively the landlord for the telescopes on the site. So we agree with each of the telescopes where their respective areas are. And there's certain areas that nobody goes. It's really that simple. So those areas are fully protected for the Wajarri people. As it relates to construction activities that are happening right now, we have Wajarri heritage monitors present at all times for any of those initial ground disturbing works, just to make sure that even though those areas which have all been surveyed, before we even started, we should probably speak about that in context. Before we even started with the SKA project, we had our team together with Wajarri. We actually walked the land sort of 400 odd kilometres 5 foot over the course of about 6, 7.
It's 4 years. The initial surveys were 4 years.
Yeah, what 6? Yeah, what 6 years total, I think. Actually walking on. I've got some feedback there. Walking the land with the Wajarri to actually determine the appropriate location for each and every single one of those telescopes, that each and every station of the telescope to be sighted. And in actual fact, about halfway through those surveys, we determined an area which was of such importance to the Wajarri people that it was just not going to be appropriate for us to continue surveying that area. So we literally, those who've been attached to the SKA for some time will know that the orientation of the telescope actually changed. And that was in order to respect the Wajarri request to respect their heritage in that area. So we literally moved the telescope to accommodate that. So that's how seriously we've taken this cultural heritage protection, the management plan, and the ILUA negotiation. And as it relates in practice, which is where I started earlier, the construction activities now, even though we have already walked every single footstep associated with where that telescope's going to go, we have heritage monitors on the ground for those initial ground disturbing works to make sure, just in case there's something under the ground, for example, that we would be clear to make sure that there's someone from Wajarri present to oversee that. And when we talk about that, we're not talking about those significant areas that Jen's already referred to, those no-go areas. We've avoided those altogether. So there's those who may have had some history or recalled some of those conversations around some of the mining companies, for example, that effectively did the wrong thing, I think, with Juukan Gorge. I don't think there's any way to not talk about this in context. I think it's really important. So as it relates to the work that we're doing on our observatory site, any of those significant areas of that significance, case paintings, those kinds of things, the telescope just nowhere near it. And that's why we literally reoriented the telescope to make sure that we have clear avoidance of all of those kinds of areas. So when we talk about initial ground disturbing works, we're talking about things like trees, like a scar tree, for example, we would actively seek to avoid. But if there's something that hadn't been noticed on the initial walkover with Wajarri people over those years, then there's someone there to manage that on the ground at that time.
So sharing culture through art and storytelling. We actually ventured over to South Africa, myself and another Wajarri artist with Beck, and we did a joint art exhibition with the Khoi people of South Africa. It was great because we took a lot of our art over there, and just to see the students from the Carnarvon Primary School, Carnarvon School, coming in and showing us their art. They painted on cardboards and, you know, all sorts of materials just so they can be a part of the exhibition. The exhibition was great. There was a quote that even though we live so far apart, our thinking are the same in the way that the art was put together. We see the sky the same as they see the sky. A lot of ours is passed down through generations because, as you know, the Indigenous people were actually astronomers before time. The sky is what taught them, it navigated them in the night sky to travel and where to hunt. So it was depicted in a lot of the art that was taken to South Africa.
Protecting country to me now is understanding the past from our ancestors, our elders. They protected our land and our sacred sites. To understand our culture, we need to protect our culture. We need to make sure that those sites of significance, are here forever and ever.
For me, that's the ultimate privilege to be able to stand up for country and culture and support our elders and the community leaders and make way for access to opportunity and choice for our new generations coming through, moving forward in caring for country, and also the opportunities within the project itself around supply chain opportunities and business and jobs and training.
We do have a cultural heritage management plan that we have in place, so that, you know, it's for 50 years, so we can, you know, in 50 years we're not going to be here, but we can go knowing that, you know, we have this in place and this is to protect, you know, our culture for our children and their children. It's a kind of a security blanket, because there are a lot of things out here that we need to protect. So it's basically looking out for our future as well.
The greatest thing about this area was we have a heritage management plan within that area, and that gives us the power as Wajarri people to ensure that these sites are protected. The protection of the cultural heritage management plan, to me, is a bigger part of the package.
This project's quite special because it's not an extractive exercise, and so we did have an opportunity to walk side by side in preserving and protecting, and then walking together in how the project manifested in terms of its footprint as per the science, but at the same time protecting culture and heritage.
Wajarri's always had a connection with the stars and the skies and the moon and the sun and everything, so we've always had that connection. What the telescopes does is bring our Wajarri perspective in with Western, well, you could probably call it Western science, Western astrology. It brings it all together. We're the oldest living culture in the world because we've had you know, the atmosphere, the sky, the stars, the moon, to tell us where we are and where our rightful place on our country is.
From the onset, SKA and CSIRO was adamant in the support of a Wheadon name for the site. It's important because what that allows is language to be prominent and place-based language to be prominent in its meaning and its use, connect to our language, connect to our stories, connect to our art and our food.
We are Wajarri, you know, we are here and we're ready to share. So, you know, welcome aboard.
We'll transition over to the panel discussion.
Thank you so much. Alrighty, so let me introduce the panel members again. My immediate right is Mongoo, who's the chair of the Wajarri Enterprise Limited. And then there's Rebecca Wheadon, who goes by Beck, who's the CSIRO site entity lead. Next is Jennylyn Hamlett, Wajarri Liaison Officer, Wajarri Yamaji Aboriginal Corporation. And at the end is Jonathan Rogers, who's the Australian Government Department of Industry, Science and Resources. And online we have Antony,
Schinckel.
Say it again.
Schinckel.
Schinckel. See, I mess up all kinds of names. SKA-Low, Site Construction Director of SKA Observatory. Shall we welcome our panel again? So I have a long list of questions. I'm going to start by asking our online guest, who goes by Ant. First question. We've heard a bit now in the initial presentation about the SKA Observatory and the SKA-Low telescope that is being built here in Australia on Wajarri, Yamaji country. You're the site construction director for the SKA-Low telescope. Can you tell us a bit more about the SKA telescopes and the ambition for this international project?
Yes, good morning. Thanks very much for inviting me. Can you hear me okay this morning?
Yes.
Great. Thanks. Beck, could you go through to the videos, please? Right. So here are a couple of videos that just show an animation of the construction of the two telescopes. On the right, firstly, is the SKA-Low telescope here in Australia, and on the left there is the SKA Mid telescope in the Karoo district of South Africa. And very important to remember that the SKA is in fact two complementary facilities in the two different regions on these two different continents. So the SKA telescope is going to answer some questions that have been arising in astronomy for several decades. And primarily, the big questions are around exactly what happened in the earliest years of the universe's evolution. The universe is just under 14 billion years old, but what we really have struggled to see is looking back to the very first parts of the universe's birth, so the first few 100 million years. If you scroll through to the next slide, please, Beck. So these telescopes, to look back into those very earliest periods, they basically need to have very, very large collecting areas. And these can be built using a technique called interferometry, which I won't get into today, but it basically means you can have many separate individual telescopes that are joined together and you get the power of one very large one. So the SKA in its two different sites, and primarily I'll talk about low, but please also do remember about mid in South Africa as well, is going to create by far the world's most powerful radio telescopes, as I say, to look back in these very early periods of the universe's evolution, but also to address many other science questions. One of the great things with a new telescope is not only the science that you think you're going to do with a new telescope, but all of the unexpected science that you suddenly find yourself capable of doing. And typically, about a decade after a telescope started, you find that a fairly modest percentage, under a third, is what you expected to find, but typically 2/3 of the science is things you'd never even thought of. One of the big ones in the background, of course, for the SKA will be that we have groups that will also be looking through the data, looking in what's called the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. So they'll be looking at all of our signals, looking for any possible hint of intelligence in the universe. Next slide, please, Beck. And of course, it wouldn't be a science talk unless it had some numbers on a chart. So I'll just quickly run through this. Just to remind everyone, the mid telescope in South Africa, down in the Karoo, works at a slightly higher frequency band than the low one in Australia. It consists of just under 200 dishes, including some that are already constructed by the South African CSIRO Observatory and government. In Australia, we have in the Murchison district there on Wajarri country, a total of what will be 131,000 individual 2-meter tall antennas. And you combine the data in these to produce the images that you'll be seeing over the next few years. I think one of the key things about these kinds of telescopes is that they are long-term facilities. It's not that you take snapshots in a very short term and after a few months or a couple of years, you've done all the science. It's an enormously long-term undertaking with facilities of this kind, with continual technology refreshes and discovering new things about the universe continuously. So that's a very quick summary of what the two telescopes are like. In terms of where we are in the construction, as Rebecca pointed out, the Ilua with the Wajarri was concluded in 2022, which then allowed, under strict controls, the construction of the low telescope in Australia, and the mid also independently started about the same time in South Africa. In terms of the low telescope, we're about 80% through the basic infrastructure construction. So that's the buildings, the roads and tracks, the large power and fiber distribution across the site, and that sort of thing. We're about 8% of the way through getting antennas built. So as you see, we are planning to build about 131,000. And as of about 10 days ago, we'd built just over 7,000. So a long way to go on antennas. Just to give you a little bit of a sense of the scale of this as well and the complexity, I'll just note that we will have over 180,000 kilometers of fiber optic cable around the low telescope site. 180,000 kilometers. So that's nearly enough to go just over halfway to the moon. And all of those fibers come through into our central building, which has an incredible amount of very highly custom supercomputing facility. That's before the data is then transmitted down to the Perth supercomputer in the Pawsey Centre for final analysis. So that's a sort of a high level overview of the two telescopes.
Unmuted. I'll go on to the next question. There was a question in the audience. I don't know if you wanted me to ask first.
Maybe if you could just start a couple of these ones and then.
So I'll take questions from the audience at the end. So my next question is for Jennylyn. So you were part of the multi-year Indigenous land use agreement negotiation process for Wajarri, Yamaji. And what does the ILUA and the process behind it mean to you?
Basically, it means a lot. As a Wajarri person, I was part of the process that negotiated with CSIRO and SKA. It's just making sure that our culture is preserved out there on the country. It was, it's very important to us. I mean, going back and forth, and like I said in the video, it's a security blanket for us as Wajarri people, because we've made this agreement, the Indigenous land use agreement, and it's there for 50 years. We aren't going to be around for 50 years, but we are going to have we have children and grandchildren. So it's basically empowering our youth, and it's just teaching them what the importance of the country is.
Thank you. And Des, you're also involved in the agreement negotiations. So what's your perspective on it? And we already saw you say a lot of things in the film. Can you say more?
I certainly can say more, and thanks everybody. And I'd also like to acknowledge the people whose lands we're meeting on here today. So just bearing in mind, as pointed out by Jonathan, that ILUA is voluntary. And it's voluntary because you can start the process, and if you don't like it, you can walk away. We've given ourselves the opportunity to commence this ILUA from the beginning, and if we didn't like it, we were quite in our rights to walk away. So, as per any ILUA negotiation commencement of it, you need to go into it and make sure you get out of it what you want, not what the other party wants, what you want, and then you have to come together and get the end product together. And the biggest sticking point in this negotiation at the beginning was protection of our country, protection of our culture, and our sacred sites. That was what we wanted as a priority. Financial benefits within the negotiation, great. They were there. That was second to us. This project is 50 years old, will be 50 years. The benefits that derive at the completion of the ILUA comes through other projects like contracts and employment and capacity and development of our people. So it was what we wanted. We wanted protection of our country. It also gave us a worldwide recognition as a Wajarri Yamaji people that this is a project is two parts, Australia, South Africa. So not only that, currently there's about 16 to 17 financial contributors to this project. To us as the Wajarri Yamaji people in the middle of the desert, nowhere in the Murchison Gascoyne region of Western Australia, this is all a new concept for us. It was all a new concept to see that there's other people that are interested in our country. So we wanted that recognition as well. And part of those recognitions was we wanted this project to share Wajarri Yamaji culture, to share what we have, because it's very unique. We don't have any towns in our native title land. We're on the outskirts of every town, but we have a settlement, a Murchison settlement, which you can buy an hamburger there for $25 if you're hungry. So it's to me, it's a reflection on how the ILUA was negotiated, and that ILUA was negotiated through a great relationship between the negotiation team, which I was the chairperson of, CSIRO and SKA delegates. It was negotiated in good faith. It was negotiated with a lot of ifs and buts. And what you want is not we want. We have to come together and agree to this. So this was a multi-year negotiation process. And it took so long to negotiate because we, as the Wajarri Yamaji people, needed to be the leaders in this project, in this negotiation. And we needed to be the leaders so we could get out of it what we wanted. The other parties had to come to us and agree. So there's several times that we sent them away to come back and give us what we wanted. As I said previously, the main sticking point was the protection of our heritage and our culture. And that's what we ended up in the end. The protection of heritage and culture was by a protection and management plan of heritage and culture. And out of that, we built a heritage protection committee, which we meet every quarter to discuss the progress of the construction and the heritage and the protection. Also pointed out previously was the monitoring of any ground disturbance, and that ground disturbance could be light or it could be heavy, but we always have monitors there to monitor and make sure that they're going. So we had the Section 18 application. We went through that process. We signed off on all those Section 18 applications because we knew that the project was going to allow us to be present there for any monitoring. Sorry, Section 18, for those that don't know, is an application to remove or destroy any sites of significance. So we avoided those, but we still had monitors in place to ensure that. So on reflection, to me, fine point on this is negotiate for what you want, not for what everybody else wants. This is why it's been such a success for us.
Thank you. So as someone who's been on site, for me, I had to fill out all of these agreements about preserving cultural heritage, which I have never had to fill out going to any other observatory. So you've done something really different here. So Jonathan and Beck, you guys are saying the ALUA instead of the Indigenous Land Use Agreement, has been described by those involved as the first of its kind in the world. What were the important aspects of the ALUA process for the Australian government and CSIRO? And what did you take away from the process working with Wajarri Yamaji on the agreement?
Okay, I'll go first. So right from the outset, because this is a 50+ year project, so we knew that we needed to develop a relationship. So we went into the negotiations on that basis. We never saw this as a transaction. The ILUA is in a way a transaction, but for us, it was much more than that. It was about developing a long-term relationship with the Wajarri. So that was the first thing that was really important to us. It took us 6 years to negotiate the ILUA. And I think as a result of that, we've clearly been able to demonstrate free, prior and informed consent consistent with the United Nations Declaration for Indigenous Rights for Indigenous Peoples. So we've definitely been able to demonstrate that through the negotiation and through how we're managing the project as well. Just one personal reflection on the negotiations. One of the Wajarri negotiation team came up to me one day and we were just having a chat, and he said, you know, this is your job, you'll probably move on to another role in the future and so forth, but I am going to be held accountable by my community forever for this Indigenous land use agreement that we negotiate. So that really struck a chord with me, and we really did do our best to enable Wajarri to have the time that they needed to observe their traditional decision-making processes. And that's one of the reasons why the negotiation took 6 years. So yeah, and I think we've ended up with an agreement that I'm certainly very proud of. And I think we really do genuinely have an agreement that is mutually beneficial to both the SKA project and.
Thanks, Jonathan. I mean, similarly, asking for the question being, what did you take away from the process? And for me, I think you'd hear similar from everyone up here today. It's very, very relationship based. There's nothing transactional about what occurred over that negotiation process. So I came to the project. I've been attached to the SKA since about 2007, right from the site decision. I was the project manager associated with the infrastructure design that was working within industry, and then I moved across to CSIRO, the National Science Agency, to take up this role. So I had an awareness of the Ulua process from an industry perspective, but I've never certainly been involved with anything like this. And you learn really quickly when you first take a seat at that table. It's not an easy process, and there's so much heart attached to it, and there's nothing transactional about that. The other thing which really strikes me is someone like Jonathan, who does work for the Australian government. The fact that he's been in this role for such a long time is really unusual. The fact that I've been attached to the SKA was also such a long time, really unusual. These two that are sitting up here today as well. This is an actual relationship. Of course, it's documented on paper, but it was forged out of that there was bickering. there was a lot of heartfelt conversation. We left the room multiple times, as Jonathan said, to observe those respectful decision-making processes. It was genuine engagement, and just knowing that we take to heart what is on paper, the fact that it really does matter to us as well as much as it does to anybody else at that negotiation table, that we take this seriously and we mean it. So that, for me, I think is really important.
Thank you. So Jennylyn and Dennis, what makes the Wajarri partnership in the SKA project, working with the SKA-Low, Australian government, and CSIRO so unique, and what can other industries and indeed other countries learn from this model?
So I'll take this one first, and just to follow on from Beck, and Jonathan and I made this process sound so good, of just clear cut, but believe me, it wasn't. It was art, and it took a lot of time. But in the end, this negotiation team from Wajarri and the SKA and CSIRO have become friends and bonded, and such a respect from the SKAO and CSIRO team that for the past funerals of our elders, the whole team has attended those funerals in Mongoo. And this is why this is so unique. And it's unique because there's not many Iluas with the Australian government, as I'm aware, but this is a very unique Ilua. And it took a lot of time, as we've all pointed out, and it opened us all up to listening and understanding. And it gave us as the Wajarri people a better negotiation process, because we've realised now, going into negotiations with mining companies, the way we negotiated at Ilua tells us we don't need solicitors when we negotiate with mining companies. That's what we want. This negotiation has learnt us to understand what we want and what's best for our people and what's the best for our community. Yes, we do need a solicitor at the end to sign off on everything and make sure everything is followed by law, but we don't need them for negotiations. We think that we have the right people to do negotiations on our behalf, because we've proven it by having an Ilua for 50 years. And if that's not telling you anything, there's something wrong with the way that we did this. but it's been a great negotiation. But what Jonathan and Beck also failed to point out is that Wajarri had a great chairperson of this negotiation team, and I think that's where we got to this stage. So Jennylyn.
Following on to what Des says, you know, what are other industries or other countries can learn from this process that we've taken, or the model that we have. It's just, if you want something, you know, negotiate. You know, we didn't all come in as friends, you know, because we all came from different areas on Wajarri, but we were there to represent one Wajarri. So we have the largest native title area within WA. So it's important to us as Wajarri people that we need to respect and preserve our culture, and by negotiating down that one path and being in agreement, like they said, you know, a lot of people went away frustrated. We were too, because what was pure and simple to us was kind of hard for other people to understand that how important it was to us, because that culture is passed down through our elders. And like Des mentioned, we had some elders that were married not long ago. My father was actually one of those that was part of the 2009 negotiation, and then I came on in 2012. So we know the importance of culture. So if other people, you know, other industries need to, you know, find out better ways to negotiate, you know, they can just come and talk to us.
I'll just add a bit more on that. Sorry, is look, as I said previously, we make this sound great, and it was great. And the biggest fight that we had to deal was amongst our own people. We had a negotiation team that came from various different clan groups within our native title claim area. So for us to work together and argue amongst each other, have different opinions, have different perspectives, we had to bring all that together as one before we settled on this agreement. So not only did we have to negotiate with SKAO and CSIRO, we internally had to negotiate with ourselves to understand and make sure that this is what we wanted as a community, as a Wajarri Yamaji people in a whole. We currently have 4,000 odd members, and we had to make sure that this was right for everybody, that we all came together, that we all agreed on this. So all the negotiation team represented different family member groups. Us as a negotiation team had to make sure that this is what we as a Wajarri Yamaji community wanted.
Going to our online guests, could you speak a little about the SKAO's perspective on the partnership with the Wajarri Yamaji people for the SKA-Low? How does the SKA Observatory incorporate Wajarri representation in its activities, and how does it differ from other telescope projects that you've seen or been involved with? And I want to pause and say that in addition to, when you go on site, in addition to signing away your life, you have to go through a cultural and historical training and pass that as well. Again, something I've never seen going to visit other observatories.
Yeah, look, thank you for that. So, yeah, there's so many different facets to touch on here. So one you just mentioned, for example, the cultural training, I think is absolutely unique that I'm aware of. It's one of the outcomes of the Allure process, and it's been enormously successful. We've had many people, well over 1,000 people now, go through that one-day training. And I think for a very large number of them, they've expressed gratitude. Many have found it extremely confronting, of course, because it ties back and shows people what's happened for hundreds of years in Australia in terms of the treatment of Aboriginal Indigenous people in Australia, as well as then talking much more about the current situation in terms of our site. And it's been, I think, a valuable process in terms of educating our staff and visitors to the site. One thing I'd like to touch on from what Des said about one of the key aspects being the protection of the heritage and the culture is that perhaps many of you might not think when you look out across what is a fairly harsh landscape that people would easily live there. But in fact, one of the things in the 18 years, which feels like a long time at a personal level, but is a drop in the ocean, of course, in the 18 years I've been involved working out in the region, that the Wajarri people and their forebears have lived everywhere on this enormous piece of land, which is now about 400,000 hectares. So there's a point, and Jennylyn's about that there is heritage everywhere that needs to be protected, has been absolutely critical in terms of us, for example, planning the layout of the telescope. And we were able to have to move very appropriately parts of the telescope to make sure we avoided those critical heritage areas. You've heard a number of people mention this morning that this is not a transactional relationship. And I think it really is incredibly important to make that transition organizationally. I think within CSIRO and certainly within SKA, changing your mindset from a transactional interaction to a much more humanistic based interaction is absolutely critical here. That's if you were going to summarize the whole situation in one sentence, it would be that change. Our relationship with the Wajarri now, certainly, I think is exceptionally good. I think there are some very clear areas where we have started, and I say started because, as has been pointed out, this is a long-term relationship. This is the 50-year relationship minimum. We have started to develop some of the specifics that will, working together, ranging from employment directly of Wajarri people on the land. We have education programs as well. So, for example, we've got a number of Wajarri working within the team, assembling the antennas, and some of them are going to develop on from those positions assembling antennas to other far more technical positions long-term within the SKA organisation. And I think that's one of the key parts of the relationship, is that not only is there a job aspect to it, but also there's a development path. You know, we're not actually huge in terms of jobs in Australia. We'll be about 130 or so total. One of the, I think, key outcomes from my perspective is that in the long term, we have people that come into the organisation. We train them in various specialised areas. It might be an electrical apprenticeship, for example. And not that they then end up working necessarily for the SKA for a long time, but then we've helped them develop skills that they can take to jobs in other organisations. So I think that's a key one. Jonathan mentioned the United Nations Sustainability Goals, and many of you, I suspect, are familiar with those very key 17 sustainable goals. And we've got 11 of them that we are actively addressing as part of our existence here on the site. So as well as employment and education opportunities, there's also business opportunities, of course. There's a number of small Wajarri companies that perform work that, we've been able to contract all sorts of different activities on the site, ranging from fencing to civil construction activities and things like that. Longer term, we're also looking to expand our relationship in terms of education. And this is an area where it's not so much like the cultural heritage training for our own people, but helping the Wajarri in their outreach programs to the rest of Western Australia and Australia in educating the world about Wajarri, their heritage, their culture, and their place on the land. So that from an SKA perspective, there's an enormous amount of engagement, I think, with the Wajarri literally on a daily, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis. Des mentioned, for example, the land protection committees that we engage with CSIRO on to make sure that everything we do on site is being done correctly. So I think that's the shortest summary I can make of what I think is an incredibly important joint venture type relationship, partnership, and very much not the transactional one that I think many of us are used to in our normal previous existence.
Sorry, could I just follow on from Andy before we bring in Jonathan back again?
Yes.
When we talk about the cultural awareness training course that we do, it's not only the people that go to site. To go to site, you have to undertake the full 1 day course, then there's a refresh later. But it's been Jonathan and Beck's team have made sure that all the backroom people, the accountants, the solicitors, they may not go to site, they work on the project, they still have to be aware of Wajarri Yamaji culture. So those people attend the cultural awareness training as well, even though they've may never ever set foot on the project. Because they're working on the project, they still have to attend the cultural awareness training.
Jonathan and Beth, did you want to add anything? The Wajarri influence on this whole process?
I've got one just while Jonathan does whatever he's doing. One of the things that we do look at from a procurement perspective, Des kind of touched on, but from a CSIRO perspective, as a Commonwealth agency, we are bound by the Commonwealth procurement rules, as may or may not mean much to people in the room. One of the things we do ensure is we have a positive bias towards Wajarri businesses for those procurements. So we will look to Wajarri first. If it's to do with work associated on Wajarri land, then we would seek to engage a Wajarri business first and give them first right of refusal in that way.
Oh yeah, so I'd just like to agree with all the things that Ant was saying about the partnership, and just add to that by saying that under the Australian government has a policy called the National Agreement on Closing the Gap, and that is about trying to close the disparity in health outcomes and life expectancy between Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and non-Indigenous Australians. A lot of what we do contributes towards closing the gap, but specifically the partnership that we have with the CSIRO and the department has with the Wajarri Yamaji has been formally recognised as a partnership under Closing the Gap, which again is something that we're very, very proud of. And yeah, we're looking to continue to build that partnership and relationship as we go forward. So yeah, that's something that I just wanted to raise as well.
Thank you for that. Jennylyn, can you talk about some of the ways you've seen Wajarri culture and heritage being incorporated in the project activities so far?
Well, one of them is the Wajarri language and the culture. Like I've said, the project has a Wajarri name. The village that's out on Wajarri country has also a Wajarri name. It's called Ngura. It means Ngiri are the zebra finch birds that fly around out there, and Ngura is just home, is where we come from, is our home. And like about the cultural awareness package, I've actually taken the cultural awareness package to headquarters in Manchester, and I delivered it for 2 days to the SKAO staff over there. That will never come to Australia, but I thought we just put it together to teach SKAO staff in Manchester about the Wajarri Yamaji people over in Western Australia. It was accepted like really well. Some of them were quite shocked in what was in the package, because it talks about our history and the Black history, our stolen generation. So passing that culture on over in another country is good for me. It felt good for Wajarri that we could share that knowledge over in Manchester. The other ways that we do it is through our art, with the art exhibition that we took to South Africa. but on this particular day when we were in Manchester, it was NAIDOC week. There was an artist that I took with me. She's an elder called Susan Merry. She'd actually did a piece of art called Our Home, which was done out on country at Bellardi when the SKA-Low representatives came to Bellardi, and they contributed to that piece of art. They put their handprints on that piece of art, and then Sue gifted it to SKA-Low. So we were able to present that piece of art at a members meeting in Manchester. It was good for Susan because being the artist and personally delivering it was great for us. So and then with the what else do we do? There is a virtual reality trip about the SKAO and what's out there.
I think it's here.
I have.
We have a headset here, so there is a VR of the site available here. So feel free to hit up Liz in the front row afterwards if you want to have a look. Okay.
So basically, that's my job, is to get the word out about Wajarri culture and what it is, and teach others about what's important to us. And like I said, you know, taking it to Manchester was really good, because then they got to feel exactly, or we got to teach them about Wajarri culture.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Can I add something super quick to that? I just one very quickly. One of the other elements which it's incorporated into the Allure is things like scientific discoveries, for example, will be given a Wajarri name. So scientific discoveries with the SKA telescope will be given a Wajarri name, as well as other things that get built. So we've spoken about the camp, but as other elements of the infrastructure get built on the site, they will also be given to the Wajarri name.
That's fine. Yeah, like, could I check some of these questions? Yeah. Okay. A lot of questions, and I think you guys have covered a lot of the Allure information. So straight to death. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. You're the chair for Wajarri Enterprises Limited, which is the business arm of the Wajarri Group. Can you tell us a bit about WEL and what it does, and how WEL has grown since it started?
Now, this is my favourite subject, because I'm the chairperson of WEL, which is Wajarri Enterprise Limited. So unfortunately, I don't have all day, and I don't think you do either. But WEL is the commercial arm of Wajarri Yamaji Aboriginal Corporation. So we, as a Wajarri group, we have the PBC, which is Wajarri Yamaji Aboriginal Corporation, who administers and looks after all the future acts. Then we have our trust, which is Wajarri Winjabana Limited. So we have a board on the trust that manages their own trust. So we're the trustee of our. And we also have the third part of that is Wajarri Enterprise Limited, which is the commercial arm of Wajarri. And it's probably the favourite for me throughout this process of being the chairperson. So WEL is commercially orientated, commercially focused, and commercially wanting to challenge all the Wajarri Yamaji businesses out there. And that challenge is to bring them together, not only on the SKAO project, but all projects within Wajarri. All the mining projects, all the DBCA projects, all projects where there's an opportunity to be commercial activities being held, so they can be a part of it. So the growth of WEL over the past 5 years has been, you know, 2023, late 2023, had one full-time employee, and that was a business manager. Now we have 48 full-time employees within Well, and they're all full-time employees either in Geraldton at our caravan park that we own. We actually own a caravan park, which is, just bear in mind the name of this is a Drummond Cove Holiday Park. So when you're travelling through Geraldton, you need somewhere to stay. So we actually own that leasehold, freehold, and we run that as a business. But the other aspects of our business is that we try and bring all the Wajarri businesses into all the projects that we deal with. We have a joint venture with Ventia, who's a construction team out on the SKA project. Our joint venture with them is to manage and facilitate the 214-man camp out there. So that's a full 50-50 joint venture. So that 50-50 joint venture employs 24 people out on site. Within that JV, we have one employee, and he's the liaison officer, the Wajarri Ventia liaison officer. And that one employee looks after all of the employees, especially the Wajarri employees out on the project. So 50% of those people employed are Wajarri people. 100% of the people employed within the facility side of things is all Wajarri people, Wajarri Yamaji people. So the capacity for us to develop Wajarri people within the SKA-O project is absolutely enormous. You know, Ant talked about some of the employment opportunities and not a lot within this project. But with this joint venture with Ventia for Well, we make it happen. We have a board for that project, for the joint venture. 2 directors from Well, which are myself and Gary Patterson, who's our commercial and legal rep, and two members from Ventia. One's based in Melbourne and one's based in Perth. So we meet all over the place. We meet in Perth, Geraldton, out on site, Sydney and Melbourne. So, and this is why it's truly a unique joint venture. This joint venture came about because we were in partnership with the Bellardi project at the beginning, and that actually changed. We were in a project with another Indigenous company in Sydney, but negotiations to tender for this facility management at SKA-O wasn't quite the fit that we saw as Wajarri people, and that fit needed to be changed. We needed to change the way that we operated. In the previous JV, there was no opportunity for capacity building. There was no opportunity for other Wajarri people to come into the project. With this negotiation for this tender between Well and Ventia, it was a struggle. It was a struggle because we had to distance ourselves from our previous joint venture and set up another joint venture with a company that we've had no relationship with prior to a meeting in Perth on a day that we were supposed to negotiate with our previous partner. That was a difficult. But moving forward on that project and that negotiation with Ventia and Oricon, who's the construction managers for the project, gave us a lot of faith that this 50-50 JV was going to be beneficial for Wajarri people and the Wajarri community. And to date, it's proven exactly that. We have quarterly profit sharing with the JV, and that at this stage, up to this stage, and bearing in mind we don't have full capacity at the camp most time, but that quarterly profit sharing has given us $300,000 every quarter to go into the well account. So with this JV, we're also looking at other projects. We're looking at the short-term accommodation in Jordan for Aboriginal people, which is with support of Ventia. We put in a tender for that. We're looking at an industrial laundromat in Jordan, because all the motels in Jordan and all the mining companies around Jordan send all their stuff to Perth. So with Ventia, with this JV, we're looking at partnering with Ventia on that. As I said, we own the caravan park. We use that caravan park as a training ground for people to go out to the SKAO village and work out there. We have full function capacity. We're in the process of upgrading facilities out at Pyre, one of our communities that's located right next door to the SKAO project. So we're in the process of upgrading that. We've put in through the tender, and that money was negotiated through the negotiation process for the upgrade of Pyre. We've now finally got that signed and sealed and ready to go. We've had our first payment yesterday, and we had our first community meeting with the Pyre community yesterday as well. So that's all ready to go. We're also in the process of, we've signed an agreement with the Yamaji Aboriginal Corporation and one of our contractors that we're going to upgrade the Yamaji office to make it bigger and better.
Thank you.
Cutting me short, but also just quickly, we're looking at purchasing the franchise. We've been in negotiation with several other business to bring into Wajarri. But also the best part of this is Phil Diamond, who's the CEO of the SKAO, has actually preaches that this partnership, he would like to see this partnership extend beyond what we do with the SKAO, and this is what our dream is, and this is what we're going to do. And if you want any advice on us, if you want to use us, just come and see me.
Thank you. So there's 3 points that I think need to be made as we wrap up, and I'm going to tell you the 3 things I'd like to hear, and I'll just let each one of you address whichever one of them. Okay, one is what learnings have you experienced working together that could be applied to other telescopes and astronomy projects such as Mauna Kea? That's one. 2, what would you like to see manifest in the future with your current partnership? And then 3, what is a key thing that you've learned that's not necessarily transferable, but something that, you know, is very precious to you? So who wants to go first?
I'll go first. Because I'll take the most easy and simplest one, and that's question 3. And that to me is friendships. Friendships gained out of this negotiation process. Trust gained out of this negotiation process. Collaboration gained out of this negotiation process. And best of all is it's a 50-year project, and it could be extended beyond that. And the best thing out of it is that we have a Wajarri business that can bring every other Wajarri businesses starting at a small level into this process. So that's my takeaway on this. There's a lot more, but this is the most important to me, what I've learned out of this process.
1-800-WELL. So for me, aside from obviously echoing what Des said, so my background was commercial negotiation acquisition. That's where I came from in industry. And so walking into an acquisition like a negotiation rather like the Allure was really tricky. So one of the questions for how transferable advice. One of the things that was said to me when I first walked into that room, don't talk about us without us, which I thought was really key, and that stuck with me for ever, and it will forevermore. So for me, you listen more than you speak, and when you're talking with Indigenous or traditional owners, for those that may be in a similar situation, a similar requirements to engage, then that would be my key advice. Don't talk about us with us.
Can I just add to that as well that I'd really like to emphasize both what Des said and what Rebecca just said, that the trust and the friendship might be the two biggest things that have come out, but the emphasizing that point of that we must not make assumptions about what we think somebody else is wanting or believing. I mean, it sounds almost trivial to say it when you enunciate it like that, but hearing from individuals about what it is that they want, what they need, and why is absolutely critical in this process. Don't assume that you think you can work it out, and it's that long process of coming to an understanding and of developing the trust, and the trust only comes with the actions. The words are one thing, and I think every one of us is quite proud of the allure and the project agreement. But as has been noted, this is a long-term project, and it's really seeing all of those good intentions actually come to fruition. So it's actually the actions which I think is absolutely critical.
I think part of the Indigenous Land Use Agreement is that we have a project agreement that is attached to that document, and that enabled job opportunities. My role came out of that, and there's 3 other positions that were available. Then we have the Cultural Awareness Management Plan that preserves our heritage and culture out on country. But I think empowering our youth would be the one that I would look to further with our young people. Through CSIRO, we have field technicians out on country that are Wajarri young people building the antennas. And I think the one thing I'd like to see is one day is maybe a Wajarri scientist out on country would be good, because I've actually saw it in South Africa where they're teaching over there. So bringing it back to our country would be great.
Yeah, just reflecting on the first question about sort of lessons that we've learned and so forth. I think from my perspective, one of the most important things, because we are talking about Wajarri country, so I think it's very, very important to make the effort to get out onto country. And for me, that means a 5-hour flight from Sydney to Perth, an hour up to Geraldton, then a 4-hour drive, 200 kilometres of which is on a dirt road to get to the site. So you just got to make that effort to show the respect that you do have the respect for that country. And just very quickly, Des loves talking about well, and I love talking about some of my personal reflections of my time on the project. And I just wanted to, so I think also not only getting to site, but understanding about the culture and the heritage as well. And I had the opportunity to go out on the site when they were doing the heritage surveys that Beck talked about 6 years worth of heritage surveys before the construction even started. I had the opportunity to go out on site, and I remember it was actually with Jennylyn's family. We were out surveying an area, and there wasn't much heritage in this particular area, but some of the young guys walking the area, they could see some slightly different land formation over to the sides. They said, "This is boring. Let's head over there and have a look and see what's over there." And there were some caves, and there were ochre handprints in these caves that possibly very few non-Aboriginal people would have ever seen this. And just seeing the passion that Jennylyn's family had, especially the youngsters, for their heritage was just really heartwarming for me. And it was fantastic. So I think just coming back to that broader question of what you learn, I think you have to invest the time. You have to get out on country, and you have to learn about the cultural heritage. It's only then that I think, as we've said, we can't possibly imagine what it is to be an Aboriginal person, but at least we can get a little bit closer and have our discussions on a footing of a little bit more understanding of Aboriginal culture.
Thank you. Before we applaud, I wanted to take at least 2 questions from the audience. I know that, sorry, behind you there was a question first, wait. Can you wait for a mic? Dwayne, do we have to stop at past?
Actually, my question has been answered, mainly by Jennylyn and Des, just really hearing about the current and on-the-ground interactions with the Wajarri people. So thank you very much. And I just want to say how amazing the session has been.
Great. Next, Wayne, and then Alina, and then Prem.
Yeah, thanks to all of the presenters, but particularly for Des and Jennylyn. Des, you've been talking about all these fantastic developments in terms of the well, supporting the future of your nation. Where does astrotourism from an international perspective fit into this? And have you also looked at the possibility of developing a dark sky reserve? I mean, maybe you've already done this, but to link in the dark sky reserve, which should be recognised internationally, and then link that in with astrotourism from an international perspective would be a wonderful development.
There certainly is that opportunity. However, because we're still in construction phase at the moment, which is going to be a 5-year construction, so we probably have 2.5 years left on the construction phase. There is opportunities for that, but as Jonathan quite rightly pointed out, I focus on well, and because I'm commercial orientated, I think our biggest thing that we have to come at is commercial, and that's part of what we do in the end, because you know, we're not going to be we're not funded for 50 years. Every year we're funded, we get a certain amount of money into the corporation, which is kind of received up front. So we have to look at other opportunities to continue the way, and tourism is part of that, and whether it's astrotourism or lamplighting tourism, that's all a part of it. But that comes together shortly. So that are with all the things that we'll have to look at shortly. So.
Alina.
Hi everyone, fantastic panel, and it's so beautiful to listen how these negotiations came in, especially for friendship. I'm also curious that when all the parties came to the table, that I assume there was an agenda, we want to have this telescope on this ground, and that's our objective, and let's find a solution for that. But was there any time that any party thought that this might actually not work out, so we can't do this project?
Every day.
I was going to say, yeah, every meeting.
every meeting. But we had to work through it. We had to work through our differences. You know, we all came together, and you know, we've previously met each other through the initial ILUA that we had. That's for the MRO. But we had to work through that, and we had to be comfortable, trust each other, that we were going to negotiate in good faith for both parties. You know, SKAO, CSIRO for their side, and us for our people. So it was all about good faith. But yes, there was times that we just felt like getting up and walk away. And there's times that we did get up and walk away, but we always came back together. So maybe Jonathan will back one out on too.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it was there were challenging times. I mean, that's the thing with the relationship, though. There's going to be ups and downs, and I think it's just being able to come back together when you've had one of your downs. But during negotiations, we were always very conscious of providing Wajarri with the time that they needed, and we were very, very often booted out of the room and said, "This is not for you to listen to. We need to have a chat amongst ourselves." And that happened a lot. And in the end, it took we had 36 negotiation meetings in the end to get this deal done. most of those were with the whole group. There was about 17 Wajarri members of the broader group representing all the different land areas within the Wajarri claim. And then there was a smaller group where we could get into some more detail, but we'd always go back to the broader group to discuss what went on there. But it was 36 meetings altogether. So obviously there's going to be some ups and downs during that. But yeah, we were very conscious of providing Wajarri the time they needed to get a good agreement.
So I'm gonna apologize to Prim and Vaughn. We're gonna go to Anton because he represents the other SKA site, so we're giving him a chance.
So for me, it's more a comment than a question. And counterpart, I used to manage stakeholder relations on the mid side. And the similarities between the Lawas and what we did in South Africa is it's extremely close to one another. And a lot of the things that been done in the Lawas, we've done spontaneously in the South African side. So again, what everyone else has said, it's brilliant listening to, especially the elders, and hearing the appreciation that a lot of times you don't hear in these negotiations when you're part of it. But reflecting on what you've said, it's inspiring to know that the project as a whole is looking after the interests and the culture of two very different but very similar groups of peoples. So keep on doing it. I'm really proud of being part of this project. And if anyone else is on the mid stuff later in the week, but this is very inspiring. It's really nice hearing that this has happened.
So with that, do we have time for one more? The boss is giving me signals.
1 minute. All right. So I have a question from Katie online, which is what educational or vocational opportunities are in progress or in development through SKA-Low pathways?
Thanks. Well, we have funded an educational mentoring officer through the agreement. And I think the educational opportunities will probably emerge more once we move into the operations phase of the telescope. It's construction at the moment. There is also, we do also get we fund school kids to get out to the site as well. So the local Wajarri school and other schools in the area, we provide funding to support them to actually head out to site and visit and learn about the telescope. So there are a few things underway. Becca, is there anything else?
Just super quick. So we did, obviously, as Jonathan's discussed, we do engage regularly with primary schools and high school on the project on the site. So we've had multiple school visits already this year, but recognising the audience that we're speaking to today as it relates to things like more opportunities at a higher level as it relates to research opportunities. So those research opportunities have been available since the first of the law, so since 2009. One of the things we recognise, of course, is that we have to pitch those educational opportunities at the right level. And that's one of the things when we talk about this education officer, that is one of the positions within the Aboriginal Corporation. We're working together with Jen and Des and the rest of the corporation as it relates to what is the right level to pitch those opportunities at. So we have the primary school, the high school, but then we have a gap. How do we get to the research opportunities? And that's something that we're addressing right now. It's a massive undertaking to make sure that those opportunities are offered at the correct level.
Hello, Katie.
Great. Anne, did you want to?
Yeah, look, I just wanted to add very briefly on that of course, as already noted by myself and Jennylyn, we've also got the trainee programs within SKA and CSIRO, where we're bringing in Wajarri technicians and training them up in different skills. And I think there's great potential there for the long-term growth of people to develop into all sorts of different technical areas, but also administrative areas. We're looking at traineeships for people who are interested in all sorts of other activities that are important to support SKA. So as Rebecca said, it's a long-term program, and partly we want to make sure that what we offer is of interest to the Wajarri community.
Now we're going into our tea break. And so, oh, here comes the boss. So you'll have an opportunity to speak to our panelists during tea as well, to ask Juan your question. Go ahead.
Thanks. Can we have a round of applause for speaking from the Thank you so much for coming. It's really been wonderful to hear what you've had to say and keep these conversations going. There's so many applications to this with what's happening around the world that isn't being done very well. So you're really bringing things together in a phenomenal way. I did want to say to everybody before we take off on our tea break and come back for the general meetings of the society, this day is only half a day. So there is an event here being held this evening. Now we're going to come back tomorrow. But what that means is everybody needs to take your stuff, including all the sponsors and tables, with you. You can store it in the area near the front for the table.